Welcome, everybody. This is Cosimo Marafa, and today our guest on our podcast is Emer O'Donnell, and we'll ask her to introduce herself, and then we will kick in with the 6 Ds.
Perfect. Thank you very much for having me. And before I talk about myself, I just want to say that I saw your recent podcast with Kapesh, I have to look his name up. And I thought it was a beautiful example of how important values are for us in the workplace. So I think everyone should tune in and look at that. So
Thank you.
a little bit about me. So I'm founder of Teen Reconnect. I'm an author also of a book called Understanding Teen Stress and Anxiety, A Parent's Guide to Building Love and Connection. And I'm also a creator of the Q Pathfinder, which is a digital tool that empowers young people to understand who they are. And my work is very much about empowering young people to live lives they love, because we all deserve that, and to support families to find more joy and avoid the stress, especially during these years.
Interesting, interesting. Thank you for sharing. If you want to mention a crisis that you had in the time ago and how you overcame it. What is your secret? What was a crisis? How did you overcome it?
Okay, so I think probably one of the biggest crises I had was when I left marriage with my my 1.5-year-old child. And I left a job that I really loved, but knew that I couldn't have been able to balance that on my own in terms of bringing up my son. And this is over 20 years ago. So it's before anybody worked from home. It was before any of that. But what I discovered long after, when I moved into the Kent countryside, which is in the UK, is that the company I was going to go and work for, which was a racing team, was on the verge of bankruptcy. So here I was in the middle of nowhere, not knowing anybody really, coming from Ireland, but all my family were there, and really wondering, how am I going to survive and put a roof over my head and food on the table for my young son? But out of every crisis, there's an opportunity to learn something. And what I learned more than anything when I was in this really stressful, anxiety-provoking situation, running around like a headless chicken, was that the racing drivers that I had come to know weren't behaving like me. They were still really focused and present in the moment, long before anybody talked about being present in the moment. They were just focused on the next race. They could find joy in their day. They looked after themselves. They were just present, and they avoided the stress and anxiety that I was displaying. And it seemed really obvious to me, I want more of that. What do I have to do it? And then it's that point about, what is it? Why did I move down to the countryside in the first place? Because that's the environment I wanted to bring my son up in, because that's what I was brought up in, and it served me well. And then it was, how am I going to get a job? And it's going back to the basics. Who am I? What do I value in my life? What do I want to create? And where can I add value and serve somebody else? And I suppose that is the basis of my learning journey, which was to develop into coaching many years later. And when we can just focus on that, rather than the fear and the anxiety of the unknown, of not knowing what's around the corner, and just focusing on that end result every day, we can really propel ourselves with the energy and the focus to create more of what we want. And I remember getting a job, and it was a 3-month contract, and it meant I could work from home, which was amazing, because I'd worked in newspapers for many years. So as I wasn't a journalist, but as journalists, they were used to sending people around the world. And so for me, I said, I can worry about the fact it's 3 months, or I can focus on the job on hand and get it done to the best of my ability. And the beautiful thing was that that job lasted for a year, which meant then that I was able to create more opportunities to serve both myself and my son, who was the guiding light in terms of what I needed to do, and also to do work I enjoyed. And I think when, as an entrepreneur, if you have a driving force within you, that you have a purpose that you want to serve, just go for it. Leave the fear behind.
Wow, Emer, listening to your real life experience is touching, and I'm so grateful that that you brought it on for our listeners today. So let's drive through the 6 Ds for everybody who maybe today is the first time here on the call. I will give a short preview what we are going to do. We are going to ask Emer about what's one desire she has for the future, what's the decision she took to get this done, and what's the declaration, because everything you decide, you need to put it on paper, you need to have a mission statement, whatever. Then how she devoted to it, how she is developing to stay up to date, and how she will deliver this big desire she has. So I can't wait to ask you the 6 questions, and let's start. What's the desire you want to share with us?
Okay, so if I think about what I want to create in the world in terms of my work, it's very much around empowering young people to live lives they love, because so many of them feel overwhelmed in the world we've created around them now. It's very noisy. And so many are not doing that. They're not feeling good about themselves, and they're stuck in that stress and anxiety. And that has the ripple impact of creating more stress and anxiety in families. So in a nutshell, empower young people to live lives they love, and support families and parents to be able to build a better connection and relationship with their children during these challenging years, where actually we all have to learn how to change, and we need new skills now to be able to do it in the world that we have now created.
Interesting, thank you. If you would tell us what's a decision that you take, or you want to work on, how would you frame it?
Okay, so I don't think it's any one decision. I think we take action and it leads to another step. There's a lovely saying, is that we don't know what's around the corner till we get there. And if we're trying to figure it all out, we probably just won't move off the spot. So for me, I think that experience that I explained to you, that story way back when with the racing drivers, was one thing, a huge learn for me. It was always been guided by my values, was hugely important in the work that I did. I was aware after working in one organization, being there 11 years, that there was a change of management that had no longer resonated with me. So I wanted more children. And then I decided to do a master's at Henley Business School in coaching behavioural change. Because for me, it's really important to know what it is that I'm doing, that I don't just let myself loose in the world without some sort of training. So that's another core value for me. And off the back of that, when I came out of that journey, it seemed really obvious to me that young people could really benefit from this information. It's not all rocket science, and the transformational power of coaching shouldn't be just for senior business leaders or elite sports stars. And actually, the one time you need it more than any other is when you're going through those teenage years, when you're really uncertain about who you are, what your strengths are, what your gaps are, so you can manage those stressors, because that's where they show up, and how to build quality relationships with yourself and others. And so then I created the Q Pathfinder with other psychologists. From there, COVID hit, and then I thought, okay, I'm going to set up a coaching company. I'm going to use this methodology. And then basically I created the 7Q program for young people to help them navigate the world we live in. And then I noticed that parents were really struggling. So then I wrote a book for them. So you can see that I didn't have it all worked out. Just as I go along, I try and look for what's obvious. I look for where I can serve a purpose, and where I'm doing something that feels joyful for me, because I think when you can bring that energy, it can transform what you create.
Interesting. Thank you. We can really feel that this is no superficial decision, but it goes deep. And how would you declare or frame a mission statement out of this decision that you took?
Well, I think the mission statement is what I said before. It's empowering young people to live lives they love and supporting parents to be the good adults that they need to support them through that journey.
Wow. Okay. Love it. And what are the action steps, the devotion you are giving to this desire you shared with us?
I think for me, it's a continual journey. It's a continual learn. I'm very aware of where my own challenges show up and how that could show up in a young person's life. So I always try and be aware of where I have what's called, you'll understand, parallel processing going on, and thinking, if this is showing up for me, how can I support them in order to manage it? Because I think we all feel fear. As the humans, we don't like uncertainty. But in order to really develop and grow, we need to be able to push that through that mental resistance, which is with all of us all the time, every time we try something new. And as for entrepreneurs, which I know is your audience, you have to nail that. You really do. When all those doubts come in, and you often talk about the, one voice on one shoulder and one voice on another shoulder, you have to be able to balance those voices and be able to really get clear on what it is you want to create, what the mission is, and removing the fear so you can connect the dots. So for me, if I think, what do I really do? I really try and calm everything down. I make a lot of what I do not about me, but where I can serve. And yeah, and I every now and then I pat myself on the back and say, well done. And it's, for me, it's absolutely pushing through the fear. Because I can tell you, I've had plenty of times where I'm so scared, about putting yourself out there, about thinking, is what you've created good enough? And actually, as we do more of this stuff, I think we become more in tune to it. And I think tapping into that inner voice is hugely important.
Love it, love it. Thank you for sharing. Can you tell us, for a fifth D, what's the develop part? Is there any strategy, anything you're working on so to stay up to date?
Sure. I do one-to-one coaching with young people, but what I said earlier was that I found that parents need more help. And then I'm very keen to develop something that's called more good adults in the world. Now, what we know from the research and the science is that a good adult in a young person's life significantly improves their mental well-being, their mental health, their chances of falling into depression, anxiety, self-harming, or taking their own lives through suicide. And so, unfortunately, we don't get taught these skills at school. So the good adult for me is the lighthouse parent. So when a young person comes and they crash up against the rocks, which we will all do, it's part of the journey, they're there to bring them in, to nurture them, to help them through it, and then be able to send them back more empowered back out into the ocean to find the next challenge, rather than what I call the fearful, controlling helicopter parent who smothers them, because none of us want to be smothered. And we all bring unique talents to the world. And I think it's your job as a parent to empower your young person or your teenager or your pupil, whoever, whatever profession you're in as an adult where you operate with and work with young people. It's your job to feed their imagination. It's your job to feed their creativity, to feed their confidence, and for them to understand who they are. So I'm on a mission at the moment to train the trainer. Because I want more people doing what I do, using the methodology that I know works.
Yeah. Wow. Love it, love it. And I think every listener who today is on this podcast then will have maybe the transcript and read it, whatever. With almost every phrase you told us, there is a picture coming up because you are so colorful with your words and with your thoughts. Amazing. If you want to describe the picture, what you see when you deliver, when you are on the top of one big desire, how would what do you see? What do you hear? What do you feel up there?
So the one thing, if I think of a picture when I coach or I empower other people to be able to coach, it's when the light comes back in the sparkle in the eyes where they know that they're okay. For me, that's hugely important because we get bombarded with external messages and then we have all our internal stuff going on too, often beating ourselves up. And for me, when you can let that go and you can actually deal with the truth that you have something special to bring and it's okay to be different. I think for me, the vision is to celebrate the uniqueness of all of us, but in a way that we build positive relationships together. And we're coming from a place of, joy and creativity rather than fear.
Mhm. Wow, I can feel that this is something really meaningful for you, for everybody who is listening, and it can be also for entrepreneurs because we all have kids and we want our next generation to make progress. As we come to the end of the podcast, is there one last suggestion, one last gift you want to share with us?
Well, I have given you some gifts to give away. So that's they're focused on the importance of teenage sleep. Also teenage addiction and knowing how that works. And then finally, a 5-step guide to having a difficult conversation, because we often avoid them. And but there's a structure and a methodology in that, which is really powerful. And I know it works. And so it's always good to get that, because again, it's not something we're often taught in school. So there are my gifts to give you. And I think two things, two quotes I want to give you as well. So, and then I've written them down here. One of them, the other one I know off by heart, is that stress is caused by being here, but wanting to be there. And that is Eckhart Tolle, who's a fellow German, I believe.
Yeah.
And he's somebody who's written that book, The Power of Now, way ahead of his time. It's a beautiful, beautiful book to read, just to keep you out of that noisy internal voice. Mm-hmm. And also the last thing I want the quote to leave you with is, it's one that my eldest son, who's now 27, said to me when he was about 4 years old, when I was backing in the car into the driveway. He said, out of nowhere, he said, "It's all about love, Mum. You just have to fill your heart with love." And I think if we can all bring that with us every day when we go out into the world, so that we love ourselves, and so then it gives us more capacity to love others, and we have the skills to do that, rather than being dragged into an internal story that doesn't serve us or others, or into those emotions that make us feel awful, then that's so empowering for us to be able to create what we want.
Emer, thank you for bringing tears to our eyes and to touch our hearts. It was a privilege and amazing having you as a guest, and can't wait to get in touch again the next time. And for now, thank you for participating in our podcast. This was Cosimo Marafa Training Academy, and wish you all the best. Bye for now.